Good evening, and welcome to the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum. My name is Harpreet Singh. I'm a first year here at Harvard College and a member of the JFK Jr. Forum Committee here at the Institute of Politics. The Institute of Politics is excited to be a part of this fall's Harvard Votes Challenge, a voter registration competition between Harvard schools. Harvard has partnered with TurboVote to streamline the voter registration process and provide important information about voting deadlines. HKS students can sign up by going to bit.ly/HKSvoter, and all other Harvard students can sign up by going to bit.ly/HarvardVoter. Before we begin, please note the exit doors, which are located on both the park side, over here, and the JFK Street side of the forum, over here. In the event of an emergency, walk to the exit closest to you and congregate in the JFK Park. Please also take a moment now to silence your cell phones, please. You can join the conversation online tonight by tweeting with the hashtag ChinaForum, which is also listed in your program. Please take your seats now and join me in welcoming our guests, Lou Mai, Rohini Bande, Anthony Saich, and our moderator, Graham Allison. Thank you.
So good evening. I'm Graham Allison, a professor here at the Kennedy School, and we have organized for you a real treat tonight, a discussion that I hope will warm your hearts, but I think also stretch your minds. So the topic tonight is what the World Bank president calls China's economic miracle. And China this year is celebrating the 40th anniversary of its opening to the market, march to the market, and considering what's happened in that period. So let me begin with a pop quiz. Okay? So 1978, China's just setting out for the market. What percentage of the Chinese population is struggling to survive on less than $2 a day? Look at this pyramid of poverty. You think 25%? 50? 75? Let's see. So 90. So 9 out of every 10 Chinese in 1978. I was alive then. Some of you weren't. Okay. Most of the panels were. We're struggling to survive on $2 a day. Mm-hmm. So just think about it. I mean, what is $2 a day? I don't think probably anybody in the audience can quite imagine. I certainly can't. I've tried, but actually the World Bank has tried to describe what the effects of this are on human beings. And if you're severely malnourished, as somebody on less than $2 a day is, as a child, by the time you've gotten to your 1,000th day of your life, your brain has shrunk by 40%. So just as and now have a good life, okay? I mean, to think of it, so bizarre. So 90%. 2018, what does that pyramid look like? What percentage today? Take a guess. Less than $2 a day in China today. Let's see. One percent. So 1 in every 100. Well, that's hard to believe. I mean, it is hard to believe. But brute facts are hard to ignore. So what we're going to do is explore this to try to better understand what's going on here. And we have a fantastic panel to do that. So it's a special honor to welcome our special guest, a colleague from China, Lou Mai, who's a graduate of the Kennedy School in 1991, so for those of you who are students at the Kennedy School, and who then spent 2 years at what was then HIID, which is now the Center for international development as a researcher before returning to China, where he's been one of the actors in this drama that has seen 90% of people who were below the $2 level raised up to better standards of living and shrunk the number of extremely poor people to 1%. Lu Mei's China Research Development Foundation is a leader in China in addressing particularly the problems of the poorest of the poor, and he'll tell us some about that. And he also has organized the China Development Forum, which is the China Davos. So as a former dean of the Kennedy School, I would say this is kind of graduates of the school of whom we're extremely proud as they go out and change the world. And so we're very happy to have him. Let's say thank you for him coming back. So in addition, we have Rohini Panda, who's a good evidence for us that this is a topic that's not finished, and the next generation of scholarship is actively digging into the whole question of poverty, not just the extreme poverty, but poverty in developing countries and economic development. Rohini is a professor here at the Kennedy School and is part of the Center for International Development, where she co-directs the project on evidence-based poverty, how do you call it?
Evidence for policy design.
Okay. So we're happy to have her offer a perspective on that, particularly in terms of the kind of research that's now being done in the US and internationally. And finally, our colleague Tony Sage. Tony, like Lu Mei, has been not only a scholar in this space, but an actor. Before he came to the Kennedy School, he, for more than a decade, ran the Ford Foundation's projects in China, including projects that were attempting to help Chinese economic development and the reduction of poverty. He here is the director of the Ash Center, which is the epicenter of Chinese studies here at the Kennedy School and substantially at Harvard. So we're glad to have such a fantastic panel. But let me stay with this puzzle for a second, because I'm a latecomer to China studies, but I've been fascinated by China for the last 20 years and have been studying it as much as I can, particularly the rivalry between a rising China and a ruling US. So I come at it from an international relations perspective, but I look at this and I say, wow, and how can this be? Now, interestingly, if we do the next slide here, China not done yet. So at Davos last year, the leader of the Chinese delegation was a fellow named Liu He. Just to again give another good shout out for the Kennedy School. Liu He is a graduate of the Kennedy School, of whom we're very proud. He's the vice premier of China now, running the economic program. And as he said at Davos, the boss, that is Xi Jinping, his boss, has said unambiguously that before the end of 2020, the number of Chinese below $2 a day is going to be essentially zero. So they're not stopping at 1%, essentially zero. And Lu Mei works with Liu He, so he may be able to tell us a little bit about how this is going. And undoubtedly, as all of us know from the old hockey stick, as you get closer and closer to the last mile, it generally gets harder and harder. So it's a more complicated story. Now, both Lu Mei and Liu He work for a very determined boss, if we'll take the next slide here. So Xi Jinping, as he says here, has made this one of his highest priorities. And again, Lu Mei may be able to illuminate that a little bit for us, how that works through the system to cause somebody to do something, to the extent that it does. I think in China, it probably has a little bit more direct impact than presidential statements in the US would be inclined to do. But in any case, you can help us understand that. So let me start with the big picture, and then we'll drill down. So if I start in 1978 and I have 90% of people with less than $2 a day, and now I jump to 2018, and that's shrunk to 1%, and where I'm on my road to zero. And I think, what's going on here? How did this happen? You know, again, I would say as a first approximation from 60,000 feet, looking at it, maybe the main storyline is a poor country, which China was in 1978, becomes a rich country, or a richer country like it is in 2018. So the lesson for those of us here from other countries, because we have lots of students from other countries, some of whom have big pockets of people below $2 a day, is get rich, okay? And John Kennedy's version of that was a rising tide lifts all boats. So if you go from the GDP of China in 78 to 2018, the sea goes up and all the boats go up. Maybe then there's a few islands or, you know, pockets of poverty, but is that the big storyline? So Lu Mei, why don't you tell us, I mean, you've been in the middle of living this for these 40 years. Tell us a little bit about how this happened, yeah. And then we'll ask Rohini and Tony to offer your thoughts about that.
Thank you, Professor Ellis. Yes, 40 years passed very quickly, just like yesterday. What's happened in China? I like the picture, it's wonderful. Just come down from 90% to 1%, 2%. First, Deng Xiaoping used very good words to set up the goal, to motivate the society. In later of 1979, he set up the goal. China should build a well-off society in the end of the 2000. Well-off in Chinese is 小康. The words come from the poem 3,000 years ago. I asked some assistant to him or involved in the policy making, but they told us this comes from Deng Xiaoping himself. Well-off means you do not worry about the food and the clothes. You're not rich, but you do not need to worry. 温饱有余，上不富裕. That's the explanation about the 小康. So he used this term and say by 1990 we should reach $500 per capita GDP, and by 2000 is $1,000. So he started reform, and the reform keep the household responsibility implemented in the rural and in the urban. So economic growth really solve big problems for the poverty. The second thing in the last 40 years is some policy we can call the pro-poor policy, like cease of agriculture tax, provide free compulsory education, set up a rural cooperative health care, and those policies benefit all the farmers, but the poor people get the most benefit from that. And the third element is the government project to fight with the poverty. Government has aid from 1984. They call it 以工代赈, work for food. You come to build a road, build a dam, and then for exchange, you get the green, you get the money. That's 1984, the project. So the different generation of leaders keep the promise. That's a political promise Deng Xiaoping made, welfare-of society. Now, by 2020, the goal set up very clear. By 2020, is the welfare-of society in all front, for all the people. So Xi Jinping, when he took over, thus he need to keep this promise: 0 people under the absolutely poverty. Nobody should worry about their food. Nobody should worry about their clothes. That's the promise he made. And he really motivated the society to fight with this poverty. Before him, the words we use is poverty alleviation. You help poor, but what's the result is doesn't matter, but you give the money, you help them. Now for him, the term change is 脱贫攻坚, get rid of the poverty. That's very clear, and that's the standard for all the government officials who need to working on this. So they took 5 approach. One is develop the project, including help those farmers in the poor, give them some tool, give them some money, help them in the technology. Second, relocated the farmers from a poor area. Totally, they plan to move 10 million of those farmers from poorest mountain area. And third one is for education. They guarantee if you go to high school, if you go to college from a poor family, it's free. And another one is social security is covered, especially for the poor and the elderly. If you was sick, rural cooperative health care cover 40%, but insurance cover another 40%, and the poverty alleviation cover 20%. So almost you don't need to pay if you are in the poverty. So the government working on this and motivated the whole society. Central government this year spent 106 billion RMB for this remained 30 million of people still under the poverty. And every governmental ministry, every level of government get assignment, and the county, the coastal area, and the big company has a responsibility to help the county in the poverty. They got assignment, and they have to finish this job. So this is a big effort. I asked some local government official, they think it's not so difficult to achieve 3,200 Chinese RMB per year. So they can help those families to do that, to achieve that goal. If not, they promise to cover by the minimum life allowance. So this minimum allowance in those poverty county, if it's below to 2%, government will take over to cover all those.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. So Rohini, you see this, I mean, you look at other countries as well as China and as overall. What do you say for somebody like me who looks and says, wait a minute, here's 1978, here's today, 90%, 1%, wow. What do you make of this?
So I think you do look at China and say, wow, I think that is certainly true. It's also the case when we look across the world. So you talked about in 1978, 90% of the Chinese lived under poverty. If you looked across the world, that was also a very high number then. And today, I think just the last set of World Bank figures came out last week. Now it's down to 1 in every 10 person lives in poverty, down from something like 1 in every 3 in 1980. And certainly China has been an incredibly important contributor to it. I think if we look at it in a broader perspective, it raises 2 questions. First, at a very broad level, should every country aim to do what China did, really try to get growth going and hope that that'll, as you said, be the tide that lifts all boats? And I think the second question is looking ahead, so I think China has something like 43 million households still under poverty. And how are they going to get out? How easy is that going to be? So I just want to talk a little bit about both of them, because I think they are quite linked. That when we look at reductions in poverty, it's certainly the case that it's still, most poverty remains concentrated in rural areas. So I think 80% of the world's extreme poor live in rural areas. So when we talk about ending extreme poverty, we are largely talking about rural poverty. And what we see, and I think you see that also in China, we increasingly see not large swaths of a country that is poor, but I think, Graham, you use this word, you see these islands of poverty amidst plenty. So I think you just talked about it, but in China, I think for the last 20 years, there was something like 680 nationally designated high poverty counties. So these are counties that would be removed from this list if less than 2%, I think in overall China or in Western regions, less than 3% are under poverty. And I think one thing that's striking is, of course, it's a high standard, but that in 2017, of this list of 680 counties, they removed 26. But it was the first time they had done any such removal in 20 years. So what tells you that in the last 20, 25 years of high poverty reduction, there were these persistent pockets of poverty. And this is true, I think, if you look across the world as well, especially in what I often describe as high poverty middle income countries. So these are countries that have become richer, but have at least 1% of the world's poor living in them. And China features in them. So those are countries like India, China, Nigeria, Indonesia. You increasingly see these countries, they're growing fast, they're becoming more unequal, and you find poverty in these sort of bits. And so the question is, how are you going to remove this last bit of poverty? Is it going to be successful, as you described, in a sort of very top-down manner, where you're going to engage, for instance, in policies like moving a large number of individuals away from, say, rural mountainous areas where you don't think there's much economic activity to peri-urban areas? I think history has many examples of attempted large-scale migration that often doesn't go so well. I think there's a question of, if you provide individuals education in today's world, is basic education going to be enough, or are we seeing returns to education only when we look at secondary education and upwards? So I think there's a lot to learn from China for the rest of the world. It is clear that growth is an extremely important element of reducing poverty. But I think we also learn that as poverty falls, economic and social disadvantage get increasingly intertwined. It also becomes more concentrated in those pockets. And I think then the question is, can you affect the last bit of economic disadvantage without recognizing that there is social disadvantage that you have to account for and take care of? So that would be the point at which...
Good, so why don't we hear from Tony, and then Lou, you may want to jump back in,
Yeah, I mean, first I want to congratulate Lu Mai and his group for all the work that they've done. There's no doubt that leadership is important. There's no doubt that economic growth is important. But I think we really need to unpack why the numbers in poverty dropped. And also, I think one thing of getting rid of the designated poor counties would be important, because there's a massive incentive to stay poor. And this answers your question, that as the number of poor dropped, the number of poor counties went up. Because, for example, there's one county, Xinshao, which was put into the list. It was worth 560 million renminbi to be classified as a poor county. So there was a lot of incentives for local officials not to declare that they were poverty-free, because they'd lose a lot of the benefits. So that really distorted things. I want to make a couple of points, and I think it's important to think about why and to think about the history. The first important point is that the biggest drop in poverty occurred before the government set up the leading group on poverty alleviation. So something else was going on, which wasn't related to direct state engagement. Most Chinese research concludes that most of the programs that the government has directed have not been successful where they're directly focused on poverty alleviation. There's other things which have been very successful, which I'll come back to. So direct intervention on poverty alleviation on the whole has not been very successful from Chinese government attempts. If you look at why did the first boom came, well, it was still collective agriculture, and the state increased purchasing prices by 20% and 40%. Immediately, farmers had a lot more income. That led to generating off-farm employment, so on and so forth. What it did do was meant that the state had a massive budget deficit, so it had to move to alternatives. And so basically the collectives got broken up. You got household farming becoming the norm. So essentially I think what's driven it are three things. Pro-poor policies, which Lu Mai correctly indicated, increased marketization and urbanization. Those three things have been really important. So I think it was more the indirect effects of government policy rather than its direct interventions which are important. And if you look at the World Bank Growth Commission, to a large extent what China's done successfully are things which relate to that, the heavy investment in infrastructure. I think one of the most important things China did was build rural roads. I mean, suddenly there was an incredible rural road building program, which was incredibly important for helping farmers get produce to get better facilities into the farms. Belatedly, important investment in health. There's also been a lot of investment into education, particularly for rural girls, and incorporating them into the workforce. Urbanization, as I mentioned, and also allowing markets to allocate resources efficiently. So I'm not denying that there has been tremendous progress. I think if we try and think of it in terms of lessons for other countries to think about, we need to kind of unpack those overall figures and say, okay, what really worked, what didn't work. One of my fears at the moment, moving forward, is this policy has to work, so it will work. The figures are going to show everybody's out of poverty. But an obsession on income masks other problems. And I saw something from Xinhua a little while ago that shows that over 40% of those in poverty say the reason is from illness and the costs of healthcare. So if it's just a concentration on getting the figures right on income, my fear is it will miss some other figures. And if you look at a place like Sichuan, there's 60% recidivism. People come out of poverty and they drop back into poverty. So it's a fantastic story, there's no doubt about that, but there's real things that have to be looked at moving forward to get the last group out of poverty and make sure that as those people get lifted out, they stay out of poverty. And so some of the things like Lu Mai's group is doing on these nutrition projects for school kids are really important, because he didn't talk about it, but what their projects show is that the improvement in school of those kids is dramatic through those kinds of programs. So those are kinds of things I think need to be stabilized and increased.
Okay, so that's extremely helpful. We're getting, different angles of this and trying to drill down on it and parse it would be the stuff of a long conference, but still trying to get the picture here. So again, I'm just, from a distance, I look at this and I think, okay, anybody that can take 90 down to 1 and is going to 0, and if the thing in question is having less than $2 a day, I cannot see how that's not a good thing and how it's not amazing, and so it amazes me. So then I say, well, if there are other places where, for example, in sub-Saharan Africa, there's 400 million other people now with less than $2 a day. And in India and Pakistan, there's 200 million people now with less than $2 a day. nobody could deny that they would be better off for whatever other problems they have if they had $2 a day. Now, and $2 a day is not nirvana, excuse me. I mean, that's, how about $4? How about $10? How about, so, Lou Mai, help us how you see this, because you've been, you know, living in the middle of it, and I think particularly as Tony suggested, part of what you do is with your research foundation is experiment with programs. I mean, you have one experimental program I think you told me about when we were in Beijing that has, I don't know how many people, 40 million or some, I mean, a small experiment with 40 million people or something. So tell a little bit how, comment on Rohini and Tony, but do it from the perspective of things you're doing, yeah.
Thank you. The situation like this, China adopt the market economy, transfer from a central planning economy to market economy. That's really give the engine for the growth. But meanwhile, for the market economy, there's a winner, there's a loser. There's some people get rich very quickly, but some people in the remote area need help. So very fortunately, Chinese government has this commitment. They will not, because those areas used to be revolutionary base, or the minority people live, or that's their responsibility. They need to fight for, to help those people. So no one behind. How can they do this time? They have our targeting to household. So fortunately, with this internet, from a central government, they can have exactly the data about this 30 million of people, where they live, and what's the problem he faced. So this is new things compared with before. And if you want to keep you in as a poverty county, that means those poor family did not change, and you will be punished. That's one thing. So new technical really helpful. For some approach, you still need some time to see, like voluntary migration. 1993, I did an assessment for World Bank about those migration in Ningxia. At the beginning, World Bank thought this migration, they criticized, but this is not a forced migration. Government built a new house. Each one cost 200,000 RMB for certain square meter. And for poor family, they need to pay 10,000 maximum, not more than that. So all those house is near the city, near the highway. So this is the transaction point. They come down, and then they can go to the city and get the better public service. So that's another thing. And we understand, for those, you said 680 counties who live in the mountain area are really poor. It's true. In those areas, there's 44 million of children from 0 to 15 years old. So they live in the poverty area. Many of them are poor kids. So we need to working on this. For example, we did some social experiment 2007, and in that county, the boys, 30 years boys, 13, is just as high as 10 years old in the city. So 3 years shorter. That time we started the school meal. We learned from US, actually. And the school meal project went very well. Government now took over, covered 32 million students from compulsory education in the rural area. And we measure, we monitoring this and measure. And we saw in the 5 years, the children grows faster compared with before. And then we started our program in the village preschool education. This one won award this time. They call the WISE Project Award. So we are very happy, very proud of that, because children in the project, totally we run 2,300, and the local government now run more than 10,000 this village preschool. It make a big changes for those children, but you spend only $300 per year. So for a school meal, it's 800 RMB, so $120 per year, but make a big changes. We started 2015 about the parenting. So we use a home visiting model to do that. In the first county is so successful, now we expanded to 7 counties. And our goal, we hope government will take over and cover all those 680 counties. We give the proposal, and Xi Jinping agree with us and gives instruction to formulate the plan for child development in poverty area from 2014 to 2020. So after that, by 2020, if government achieve the goal, that goal is in the poverty area, the children should reach the average of Chinese rural area students achieve. So if we reach that level, we will continue, especially for the 0 to 3, the earlier child development. We also learned that from US Head Start, earlier Head Start, and we adopt that in Chinese local situation, and it worked well, and we have a lot of data. We would like, if anybody interested, we would like to discuss it.
So, Lu Mai, let me be simple-minded to just try to push a little further and then to get comments. So, it sounds to me like you and Lu He, whom I have talked to about this, and he agrees with you, and your boss, Xi Jinping, think this is a soluble problem, and you're going to solve it by the end of 2020. That is to have no people, essentially zero, you said, below $2 a day. So that's what you said, I think. So you think, okay, we figured out how many there are, 30 million. That's how many you said are left. We know where they are. They are in 680 some counties. We know their name, presumably, you said that now we have a database. And then we know how to fix this problem. We got 5 things to do. We can either encourage them to move, and we can have the children have a nutrition program, and we can do this, and we can do. So that sounds to me like an engineer basically fixing a bridge or something. And it sounds a little ambitious, a little, slightly amazing, but it's amazing. I'm already amazed to get from 90% to 1%, so I can believe in miracles. So, if I got it, this is a problem. You've defined it, you think you understand it, and you're going to solve it. Is that it?
First, I'm sorry, I need to correct you. Liu He is assistant to Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
I come from non-profit organization,
Yeah.
so far behind of that.
Yeah, but I know for sure that Lu He thinks extremely well of you and appreciates the work you do, obviously.
That's right. That's a policy making process we learn from here. But in China, this is a bottom up and a top down process. So they listen if we give a suggestion to help him to solve the problem. Can we finish? Can we end of the poverty, absolute poverty? Is that a question? Yes, it's a question. We have a same question. This gentleman in Guizhou, Bijie Qixingguan poverty area, he is the age just 40. He was born 1978. He just studied 2 years, grade 2, and then finished and cannot continue. But now he is in the poverty. What he learned? Look at in the war. Someone owe his money he worked for, and he write down on the wall. Only himself can understand the calculation. Nobody understand. How to help him? Government build a house for him. This is a government build a house, and the government give him a pig and for him to raise and earn some money, but he has no skill. The pig was dead, so that's the problem. But now government official give him assignment as a forest guard. Every month earn 1,000, but he need to chop the area to prevent the fire. That's a public job. But for the future, because the future, we will have a high tech, we will have a lot of new problems. So future is those children. So the girls, these pretty girls. Mm-hmm. So I cannot help him, help her. His score is very low. That's the problem. But for another 3, this family has. We help them in for the preschool. We help them for the parenting. We help them with the nutrition intervention. So look then, they are more healthy and more educated. We will change this intergeneration transmission of poverty. We will help those families have a sustainable poverty alleviation. And I think absolutely poverty will become the history in China, but fight with the poverty is still a big issue.
Okay, so let me just say that we're issuing now an invitation to you today to come at the end of 2020 or the beginning of 2021, and we're going to have a celebration if this is successful. I wouldn't bet against it. I don't know. Ronnie, what do you say about this? Because you don't,
yeah.
no other country does this. I mean, India doesn't do this. The US doesn't do this. Nigeria doesn't do this. So I find it bold, a little shocking, audacious maybe. What they make?
I mean, as you said, we should watch, and I think I think there's a long history of trying to think of anti-poverty policies as an engineering problem, and mostly everyone has discovered that people make it hard, right? So engineers like working with, say, atoms. They're predictable, you know what they do, but then when you have policies and they need to be delivered, there are people involved, and people, as we all know, can't be fully predicted. So just one thing I'll mention, which I recently saw, which I thought was interesting, and I know we are short of time, so I'll end there, is, as we know, Xiping has also had a very well-publicized and large anti-corruption campaign. And one of the places where there's been significant effort has actually been in the distribution of anti-poverty funds. So a lot of anti-poverty resources in China go to the local county level and are then distributed locally. And I think that's just one example of when there are people and people have different preferences, we may want our resources to go to children, and in many countries the problem is perhaps even larger, but I think that's just one example of where I think an engineering approach may come up against people.
So Tony, you have studied this problem for a long, long time and done a lot of things about it for a long, long time.
Very quick, because I guess people have questions. I mean, I think one of the most important things Lu Mai just mentioned was the learning experience of the government to target households rather than geographic areas. Because the targeting to geographic areas, a lot of poor people didn't live in those areas. There was a lot of leakage, a lot of corruption. So I think that's been a very important shift. The second thing that I worked on a lot back in the early 90s was on microfinance programs, which were very helpful in terms of helping particularly women in some of the impoverished rural communities to find ways to move out of things. So I think that was another important factor. And again, it was a good learning experience for the Chinese government. I think the other two problems really come back to what I said earlier. Recidivism has been very high in the past, so it's how to avoid that. And then the next challenge is really going to be when you've got people out of absolute poverty, not only how do you keep them out, but how do you advance to the next step? Because we do know in urban China also, which often doesn't get spoken about, there's about 19 million people receiving the minimum living support, DBAO schemes. And so there's also a significant set of issues there as well. So there's going to be enough to keep Lu Mai and his organization going for quite a few years yet.
Okay, so we'll all look forward to the end of 2020, or if you finish early, but in any case in 2021. Let me open the floor to the audience. There are microphones here on the floor, and I don't know whether upstairs or not. Yes, at the loges.
Yeah.
And stand up, please, at the microphone to make your point, please. Yes, sir.
Hi, my name is Ryan Davis, and I'm a senior at the college. My question is about the social credit system, which is supposed to roll out in China by 2020. I asked this question with the assumption that maybe we don't, or that China does not fix the zero or get to the 0% poverty goal by 2020, or with the assumption and agreement that even if you're at 0% poverty, you can still dip below that. Well, I know the program still needs to be tweaked and it's largely unknown. The things that I've read about have said that undesirable behavior will be punished with things like worse loan conditions, being given the stigma of being a bad citizen, and prevention of certain jobs. So my question is that a lot of the undesirable behavior that will be punished is a natural consequence of poverty and living in adverse conditions. For example, a food insecure person is more likely to commit some sort of property crime or theft. And so wouldn't this program directly impede anti-poverty measurements? And if so, how do you reconcile these two goals?
Good question. Good. Please. Lu Heng?
We separate with this rural poverty area with urban, with some cases you mentioned. And in rural, give credit is also the way to help a poor family, but to make sure they have seeds, they have a pig to raise, and have some tool. It is a problem, the bad loan for Bank of Agriculture. For those kind of the reason they failed to achieve the goal. So in that case, I think the government need to be final responsible for those loans. Yeah.
So maybe this gentleman. Thank you.
My name is Patrick Ramirez. I'm a junior over at the college studying government. And I was wondering, it was mentioned that you're part of a nonprofit organization and how you work with the central government on tackling this issue. And I'm familiar with how the American government, interacts and the roles American non-for-profits interact with the American government in tackling these type of issues here. But I was wondering how that works more in China, if you could expound on that and your respective roles.
As a non-profit organization, we a little bit different. For example, with the Ford Foundation, we affiliate with a government think tank. That's advantage or disadvantage. Advantage is if we have some suggestion, we have a result, we through that channel directly go to the top leader. Disadvantage, yes, financially we are independent, but not totally.
And Tony, say a word about how the Ford Foundation was part of, or with respect to this question, for foundations and the government and the environment.
Well, when I was running the Ford programs in China, it was at a time when the Chinese government didn't have as much money as it has now to put into projects. There weren't as many international organizations in China, apart from the World Bank. There was only one or two others. So we, in a sense, were in a very privileged position to be able to work in policy areas. The most important thing, though, is that we never ran projects in China. We funded other people to do those projects. So, it had to be something that organizations or local communities felt was important, and then we would help them with funding. And what we tried to do, coming back to some of the points that Lu Mai was making earlier, we tried to work with local communities that were trying something experimental. So we did a lot of work in reproductive health, for example, social forestry. But we tried to link those experiments with the relevant ministries at the center so that the local experiment had some feedback into people with decision makers, because there's no way we could take something to 40 million people or whatever. I mean, we were working in very small villages, very small counties. So someone had to think this was a good idea and champion it and then sort of scale it up. To be honest, it wasn't easy. At that time, China didn't have a great understanding of not-for-profits, and there was a lot of suspicion about what we were really doing. But there were a lot of great people doing fascinating things, and we were able to help them. I think it's tougher now because the Chinese government has so much more financial capacity that I think finding the niche of where do you provide value added, and China has so much more international engagement, many things that Lu Mai talked about that they've learned from experiences in other countries, that finding the niche that makes you special, I think, is tougher now than when I was working there.
Well, the gentleman in the loge, please.
Thank you very much, Graham. My name is Dimeji, and I'm from Nigeria. And this is a really interesting subject for me because just last month, the Brookings Institution says that the largest number of the extreme poor people now live in Nigeria and no longer India. So this is really key for me. Right now, I think that we do not even have a coordinated approach to this. We haven't even started to tackle the issue of poverty. And meanwhile, in the last 10 years, we've actually had, decent growth. So the issue has been, how do you make this growth inclusive? So I just wanted to tap into your experience, to say from a policy point of view, from a government point of view, how do you organize yourself to begin to address this issue at the root?
Great, thank you. So, Lu Mai, you've just been hired by the government of Nigeria, let's imagine. And tell, can you do this in Nigeria? What's the answer?
Yes, if I say what Chinese people did, and you can do also. 40 years is not very long for us. We went to Liberia, and invited by Liberia government for a school meal project because we run that in China successfully. So we would like to share with them. Just think about that. Inclusive means you think about people's need. Those students in the school eat 1 meal per day. So they have land. They can grow the rice, but the company import all rice from other country and consumed by the government official, by the top society of the people. That's unfair. That's not inclusive. Home growth and school meal. That's our plan. We want to work with them. Everything started from small, but I believe, I still have a faith about the human being. People want to have a better life, and people can help each other. And here I would like to say, Chinese people make a progress. I should say we work hard. Our leader made some mistake, but not too many. But we feel very appreciated for the help we received. World Bank, especially the 1980s, 1990s, helped China to design the program for those loans. Asia Development Bank, other international organizations, scholar, including here. We treat the Chinese government official with Tony, about 600. That's a capacity building. So we very appreciate that. We didn't say we should not, we never forget about this. That's say sincerely, thank you.
Oh, thank you. So we have more people up than we have time. So what I'm going to do, since you were already standing, this lady in the loge and this lady on the floor, please ask your questions together, and then we'll respond to them. And I apologize for the others that are up. Please.
Hi, I'm a student, and I'm from China. I'm a sophomore in the college. I wonder what kind of advice you'd give for someone who would like to go back to China and approach these problems and help to, from a social science perspective, what kind of advice would be appropriate? Thank you.
Thank you. And then this lady's the final question. Yes.
Hi, I'm Rainbow. I'm a researcher visiting the Ash Center. Following the Nigerian colleague, I'm from Zimbabwe, and 54 other African countries are looking to China to, copy the model. Are there any disclaimers that you can give us? Because we might know the steps that led to China's miracle, but we do not know what we should be cautious about in the process. And after the miracle, then what? Are we looking at democracy? Because that is what some of our leaders are telling us. Are we looking at authoritarianism? What should we then look at after the miracle? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, two simple questions. We don't have much time, but Lu Mai, what would you say? Yes.
Welcome to join us.
Yep.
I bring some of my colleagues here, one back from Oxford, one from Washington University, and so come and talk about that. About the China miracle, yes, no shoes, any shoes can fit everybody. So find your way. And about the democracy, I should say, which one first we need to think about carefully. Freedom is the priority, is the precondition for the market economy. But no theory proved that democracy is a precondition for market economy. So I don't know. The most important things is accountable. The government should take responsibility to the people, for the people. Otherwise, election for his career, for her career, that's not solve the problem of the people.
So unfortunately, we've come to the witching hour, but let me say again, on behalf of the Kennedy School and us at Harvard, it's amazing to think of students come here, something happens, sometimes they go back to their country, amazing things happen. Harvard tries to take a little bit of credit for it. I don't think necessarily deserved, but we're certainly happy to have been part of it. And I think the point that Lu Mai made about the programs that Tony has run at the Ash Center, training people from China to help build capacity, is again suggestive of the ways that we've at least had a little part in a miraculous story. But I would say for an opportunity tonight to hear from one of the people who's been part of this, we're very grateful, and we're looking forward to your coming back and before as well for discussing how the process is going. But certainly for the end, we're going to look forward for a great celebration. So let's say thank you very much. Good. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lu Mai.